engagement. Your journey to customer transformation starts now. All right. Welcome back to another episode of Customer Transformation Live. Glad for you to be here. Dan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. Super excited to be here. My name is Dan Gingiss. I am the experience maker, and I am a keynote speaker on all things customer experience. And I live at the intersection of CX and marketing. So I'm a big believer that customer experience is the best form of marketing. It is the best way that we can generate word of mouth marketing. And that's what I teach people, is how to create the kinds of experiences that people just cannot wait to share with others.
I love it. And we have talked before and we got really into it. So I'm looking forward to having a conversation today. I start my book out with the common phrase, the customer is always right. Now I go into a little details around why I think that might be true or not. But I am curious, from your perspective, is the customer always right?
No, the customer is not always right. I think the customer, though, always deserves to be heard, and that's really the differentiator for me. Only there is even an exception to that, which is that if your customer is spewing hate or is a troll in any other way, then I don't think they even need to be heard. But for the most part, all customers need to be heard. It doesn't mean they're always right. And sometimes resolving an issue doesn't necessarily make the whole situation right, but it does at least make a customer satisfied and willing to move on. But this idea that the customer is always right suggests that the customer has total power to demand absolutely anything, no matter how unreasonable. And I don't think that that's true.
In today's world, especially with digital media, it almost feels as if they do have ultimate power. Or we can say, at minimum, they do have the power to quickly leave your company if they don't get what they want. So, how does that play into account when you're trying to build these great experiences?
So you're absolutely right. And I would say that one of the key metrics that I always suggest looking at in customer experience is customer retention rate, which is the percentage of customers that you keep on a monthly or yearly basis. That said, occasionally there are customers we don't want to keep, and that's okay too, right? I'll give you an example there. When I worked in the credit card industry, I worked on the rewards programs for a couple of years. And one of the things that I found was that if there was a way to game a reward system, people would figure out how to do it. And so my job was to game the gamers, was to figure out how to counteract the gamers. And sometimes the way that we did that is we sent them off to our competitors and said, you know what, if you're going to game somebody, don't game us, go game somebody else. And sometimes you have to do that. But I am a believer in, first of all, I'm an optimist. I'm all about positivity. It's why all of my content you'll see are, I share positive examples of experience. And so I am a believer that the vast majority of customers are good, they mean well, and even when they complain because they care. They actually want you to fix their problem versus moving to somebody else. Sure, customers have a lot of power today because switching costs are pretty low in almost every industry. It used to be almost impossible to switch your credit card company or your bank or your cable company, and now it's really not that hard. But we still have to make sure that that we are treating our customers with respect, that we're valuing them as the assets that they are to our companies. When I talk with companies, I always like to ask the question, what's your number one asset? And if they answer anything other than customers, they're incorrect, because customers are the only things that if they go away, we don't have a business. We can have a business without employees even, but we cannot have a business without customers.
It seems so basic, and yet it's amazing how many organizations struggle with that concept. But I do want to go back to something you said. If we are so dependent upon our customers, which we are, and I do agree with you here, there are cases where there are some customers you don't want, but for a startup or for a small, medium-sized business, every single customer matters. And so to tell them that, you know, some customers, it's okay if you say no to, they struggle with that concept because they're so fearful of losing whatever customer base they do have. So how do you
Sure.
balance that?
So I can identify with that very well as a solopreneur whose main source of business is either speaking engagements or thought leadership type activities with companies. And what I have found beyond a shadow of a doubt is that the customers that pay me the least tend to be the biggest pains in the neck. I mean, it's just whether it is that things take longer to accomplish or they take longer to pay or whatever it is, they're always more of a headache. And so at some point I decided on basically a minimum amount that under which I'm going to pass, and I'm going to be very friendly and say, let me refer you to somebody else who might enjoy this business more than me. But I just got to a point where I wasn't willing to take on these really small clients that tend for me to be way more work than they're worth. And that work doesn't lead to anything else, right? And so I might as well be spending that time trying to work on clients that are paying me more. And so is that difficult? Yeah, because even a client that, that I won't throw out numbers, but whatever is going to pay me X, it's very tempting to say, yeah, but I'll take X over nothing, right? But that's a tough way to do business, because you end up negotiating against yourself, devaluing your own product and your own service or your own time if you're a consultant or solopreneur. And like I said, oftentimes those don't end up leading to anything else. There have been some times where I've started off with a very small contract with a customer that has ended up being lots more money down the road. And if I can see a path to that, then I'm certainly more flexible. But that to me has been the exception rather than the norm.
And this is where organizations get, we'll just say, desperate. And I think there is a line that goes into marketing, because oftentimes as a marketer, your goal is to fill up the pipeline. And so you go and, you're solely looking at a metric and you're saying, hey, we've got, 200 people, 500 people, 10,000 people. We need more. Well, is it really about more, or is it about the right customers? And that's what you're really talking about.
Yeah. And so, as I mentioned, I was a marketer for most of my career. And so I understand this desire to constantly bring on more customers. And most businesses, no matter what the size, this is their focus. It's about more customers and more sales. Instead, if we spent just a fraction of that energy, money, and time on keeping the customers we have, then these customers end up growing with us. And most importantly, they end up referring us to new customers. So we still can gain new customers, but we do it more organically, and we don't spend all of our time trying to acquire new customers, but then ignore the ones that we have. And I think this is such a strange dynamic in companies, because the customer base that we have, no matter how big or small it is, these are the ones that are paying our salary. These are the ones that are keeping the lights on. And they're often the ones that don't get our attention because we're so focused on bringing in more people. And so we've got to be able to do both and do them hand in hand. But I'm a huge believer, again, that if we use customer experience as our secret weapon, we create happier customers who then stay with us longer, spend more, and refer others to us. And that, to me, is a much more sustainable growth model.
The focus on customer, especially when we're talking about loyalty and ensuring that everything that we do contributes to making those customers happy, is a cultural issue for an organization. I purely, fully believe this. And what you're saying, for example, the customer pays our paychecks. If we are not keeping them happy, we lose customers, then we have to start letting people go. That's all there is to it. The the interesting thing is that when you look inside of some of these companies, they don't see it that way. They see other factors as being the reason that they're in business. And so that that loyalty and customer experience, the customer centric mindset is often missing which is the primary driver for ensuring that you keep those customers.
100%. And this is what I try to do with my speeches and with my coaching. Is the whole idea behind my brand, the experience maker, is actually not that I'm the experience maker. I am an experience maker. But the whole idea is that every employee in your business should be the experience maker, or at least they should feel that they are, whether or not this employee ever even speaks to customers. I always try to imagine like some person buried in the finance department, right? Maybe they're in billing. Okay, they don't ever actually talk to customers, but they make decisions every day that impact customers. And so if they're not thinking through those decisions through the customer lens, my belief is they're making bad decisions. I'm a huge believer that we can still make great business decisions by always looking through problems through the lens of the customer. We're still going to end up with decisions that make us money, but we're going to make sure that the customer's okay in the process. Here's the opposite of that happening. And this is fictional, but I'm sure something like this happened. I always imagine about a dozen years ago, some guy in finance, and I don't know why, but in my imagination, it's always a guy, goes up to his boss, and he works for a major airline. And he says, "Boss, I got a great idea on how we can make an extra $1 billion a year." And the boss says, "Whoa, okay, I'm interested. Tell me." And the guy says, "We can charge people for checking their bags." And the boss says, "Yeah, but they've been doing that for free for 50 years. And the guy says, "Exactly." And that sort of deviousness of like, let's just make more money on the backs of our customers. Let's not provide any additional value to them whatsoever. That's a great way to lose customers. And sure enough, the airline industry still today, people hate the airline industry because of those kinds of tactics. Whereas instead, you look at a company, maybe a small business that says, all right, unfortunately, we have to raise our prices because goods are getting more expensive and we've had supply chain issues, COVID hurt us and all that. But while doing that, we're also going to add this piece of value to our customers. So our customers are going to understand that our prices are going up, but we're not doing it in a vacuum, and we are doing it in conjunction of a way to make our customers' lives better at the same time. That's such a better conversation to have with people than we're going to start charging you for something that's been free for 50 years. It's just the difference of how you approach it. And so to me, that small business has customer centricity baked into their whole mentality, into their whole culture. And you can make a decision in the bowels of the finance department that still makes customers have to pay more, but also provides them more value.
Absolutely, 100%. I talk about this from the outside in perspective. That's how I phrase it, right? You're always constantly looking from a consumer perspective to make your decisions. And whether it's finance or HR or anybody, you should always be thinking about how might the customer think about this. Yesterday, I was having a conversation on LinkedIn. I typed something up and it was around customer journey mapping exercises. And the question is who should you communicate the success of those customer journey mapping exercises? And most people, internally marketing, it's like, why don't you communicate the success to everyone in the organization? Why don't you communicate it to HR so we get a better understanding of what the right clientele or people or profile is to hire, right? What here's an idea. Have you communicated the success of your customer journey map to your actual customers? Now,
Yeah.
this is something that is mind-blowing to a lot of people. And yet that transparency and that understanding of, look, we are actively thinking about you and trying to make the experience better. And when we made these changes, this is the outcome for you. I think you start to build more loyalty in that. But this is an example of something that probably no company is actually doing.
So 100% agree. They don't call it a feedback loop for nothing, right? A loop is circular and it requires you to go back to the person giving the feedback to say, hey, we heard you, we listened to you, and we did something about it. I do want to tell you a story of a company that did do this last year, and I thought this was absolutely brilliant. So a few years ago, the Skittles candy company made a decision that I thought personally was a horrendous decision. They changed the green flavor of their original pack from lime, which is my favorite flavor, to green apple, which I think is the most disgusting artificial flavor out there. However, a lot of people like green apple. So there was much discussion on social media, pros and cons, people who liked it, people who didn't. As it turns out, I think the lime people won. And after a few years, Skittles made a decision to reverse back to the lime. What they did next, I thought was brilliant. The first thing they did was they posted on all of their social channels a video that was an apology video to all of the people that had complained about lime going away. And in the video, you know how at the end of a TV show or movie, you see the credits roll? Well, this had credits rolling, but it actually listed all 187,000 people that had complained on Twitter and all of their handles. And it went by like, a mile a minute. You couldn't find your own handle, but it listed everybody. I thought that was so smart. And then they sent an individualized tweet out to each one of those 187,000 people, I know because I was one of them, that had a video that was from their head of marketing that I'm pretty sure was an actor, that was this humble apology for making a mistake, and that at the end of the video had a QR code to redeem for a coupon for a free bag of Skittles. All of this mess later, like 3 years of me tweeting out, showing pictures of me separating out the greens from my pack so I could throw them away, like 3 years of this. And I love this brand more than I ever have before because they closed the loop, and the way they did it, I knew this wasn't true, but it made me feel like they made this change because Dan Gingiss suggested it.
Yeah.
That's how they made me feel. And that's why I love them. And so it is possible. You're totally right. It does not happen very often. But look, for companies that are like, okay, I don't have the budget to do this. At the end of the day, if you collect feedback in any mechanism, let's say you send out a satisfaction survey and there's an open-ended question, or you ask people for suggestions, and even just one person says, what you should do would be to replace green with this. And then you do it, go back to that one person and say, we did it. And they're going to love you for that. They're going to think they're going to be on top of the world because they're going to feel like they made an actual impact on a company that they care about. And these are the kinds of things that get people talking, because they're going to tell their friends and say, you'll never believe it. I made this suggestion to a company. I never thought they would even listen to me. And they did. And they told me about it. Isn't that cool? And there you got your word of mouth marketing.
You have the same example of this. I'm flipping through your book right now. I'm going to pop this up on. I'm flipping through your book right now. You shared a story of Curry and his shoes that is basically the same one. You want to share that one too?
Sure. So Steph Curry, the NBA All-Star, received a handwritten letter from a 9-year-old girl named Riley Morrison. And Riley, this letter is brilliant. I mean, she knows that he has a daughter named Riley. She knows that he's been a big supporter of women's athletics. And so her issue with Steph Curry is that his shoes are not available in girls' sizes. And again, here's a guy that is, a public figure, an NBA All-Star, a multimillionaire, and he gets a handwritten letter. Now, I think most people hand it off to their assistant and tell the assistant to write back. But this guy actually wrote back a handwritten letter to this girl, and first of all said, you're absolutely right. We need to fix this immediately. And I've called the production people and we're going to fix it. He then says that he wants her to have the first pair of shoes off the new line. And then he says there's something coming up for International Women's Day, and he's wondering if she'd be interested in working on a project with him. Now, can you imagine this 9-year-old girl being like, Steph Curry wants to work on a project with me? So, of course, she says yes. And the project turns out to be that she designs the sock liner for the new girl shoe that he's working on. Huh. And then the Under Armour posts a picture of Riley holding the sock liner, and she's autographed it for the NBA All-Star, which I think is just is so brilliant and is marketing gold, right? And so what I tell people is if Steph Curry can respond to a letter from a customer, so can you. Now, I wrote a letter recently to the CEO of a company that I had not one, not two, but 7 bad experiences with. I sent an email directly to this person. I sent a follow-up directly to this person. I then decided to get really creative and send a copy of my book to this person with a printout of the email that I had sent. My offer to this person was that I was going to be in his headquarters city doing a speech, and that I would be happy to stop by and for no cost, help him with some suggestions on how poor their customer experience is. I never got an answer, ever. I didn't even get an answer from an assistant. And that is such a lost opportunity. And this is like, I'm in their loyalty program. I'm high up in their loyalty program. Like, I can't believe that this company didn't feel like getting back to me. But Steph Curry, great example. And if he can do it, so can we.
I think
And by the way, the only exception I have found to this, I did spend a year working at McDonald's, and McDonald's has billions of customers. And I do think that without technology, it is nearly impossible for them to respond to everybody. I mean, they get mentioned in social media over 1 million times a day. Okay, so we need technology in order to respond to people. There's not enough humans to do this, right? But most companies don't have billions of customers. Most companies don't even have millions of customers. In fact, most companies probably have under 1,000 customers. So if you think about it from that perspective, what would it take, for example, for you to send a handwritten thank you note to every one of your customers this holiday season? What would that take? A few hours? It's not going to take you weeks, right? And so these are things that I believe that smaller businesses actually have an advantage, believe it or not. Whereas oftentimes the mindset is, oh, I can't possibly compete with Amazon or whatever else. But sometimes I think the small businesses have an advantage in that way because they can create these connections that the large companies can't do.
Yeah. I sent a copy of my book and an email to somebody, CEO as well at an organization. Same thing, problem. I actually know people at this particular company, so I leveraged my network. Same thing. I didn't hear back. I think on some level, there is definitely an ego behind that, right? Like we know what our customers want. We know what a good experience is. We know what we're doing. Fill in the blank. And I've said it before, if you believe you know what your customers want before asking them actually what they want, you're most likely going to lose those customers. And it's so hard for organizations to just put that ego at the door. Your Skittles example is incredible because they've basically said, look, we're wrong. We admit it, we're wrong. How often do people actually come out publicly, especially corporations, and say, we're wrong? They try to dance around it and say, well, we recognize that you have an opinion here and we're going to listen to it. Thank you very much. Maybe we're going to fix it, but they never actually say, look, we're wrong. There's several cases this year alone where organizations made drastically bad decisions and never came out and said, oh, we're wrong. And
Yeah,
so that,
it's because my belief here is it's because PR teams and legal teams have been trained to be as conservative as possible in those situations. I won't tell you which company that I worked for that did this, but whenever the in-house legal counsel said, we're gonna check with the external counsel, I would always say to them, don't bother. And they'd say, why? And I'd say, because they're going to say no. They have no incentive to say yes, none. And so we pay them a ton of money and they say no to everything. So if your answer is you're going to go to external counsel, just save the money. I'll assume it's a no, right? And the problem there is that when we are that conservative with how we think about things, that we can't possibly fathom any bad news. I'll tell you another thing that's happened to me in corporate America. One of the companies I worked for, our website was down, and I wanted to go on to Twitter and say, our website's down, we know it's down, we're fixing it. We'll have it up as soon as we can, because we were getting thousands of phone calls and the call center was dying. And the PR team said, well, we can't tell people our website's down. I said, why not? And they said, because what about people that didn't know it was down? I'm like, so you'd rather them come and find out for themselves? Like, don't be afraid to say our website's down. We're working on it. We'll let you know when it's fixed, because that actually will stop the phone calls. And so it is one of the things that I found, and I think this got even exacerbated after COVID, is I think customers actually are very forgiving of mistakes. They understand that there are humans in the business and that humans make mistakes. Stuff happens. I think people get that. The thing is, from a customer experience perspective, it is what happens immediately next that matters. And that's going to determine whether you keep the customer or not. I'm sure you've seen the same research I've seen, that people tend to be more loyal to companies where something has happened and the company fixed it than if they never had a problem in the first place. I believe the reason for that is that we want to know that companies have our back. Yeah. And when they show us that they have our back, we're loyal. Right? We know. The best example of this is the insurance industry. We pay and we pay and we pay and we pay and we pay premiums after premiums after premiums, and we have no idea whether this company is going to have our back until something bad happens. And then when we file a claim, that's the first moment we figure out, does this company have my back? And if they do, we pat ourselves on the back and say, well, thank goodness I'm a USAA member because they have my back. Or that's the moment we decide to switch insurance carriers.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that, right? And so there's this concept of if you understand that customers will forgive a mistake, they're not going to forgive a mistake every day, but they're going to forgive a mistake, and that you making it right is going to go a lot further than you pretending it isn't happening.
Yeah. And we share everything about our experiences online. Let me tell you about this restaurant was purely average.
Yes, that is not what we talk about. So people share only two kinds of experiences. We share really good ones and really bad ones. That's it. And as I like to say on stage, nobody shares an ordinary experience, an average experience, or what my millennial friends call meh. Nobody shares those experiences. And so nobody has ever said, let me tell you about the perfectly average restaurant I went to last night. So the thing is that we have to be knowledgeable about is most experiences that consumers or B2B buyers have are average. They're ordinary, and that's why no one talks about them. And so you can either get your customers talking about you by giving them great experiences or by giving them terrible experiences. Those are the two ways you're going to get them talking about you. And obviously, anybody with a brain is going to want to go for the former, which is create a positive experience that people want to talk about. And I find over and over again across all industries that when you give a customer a remarkable experience, the word remarkable is intentional, worthy of remark, worthy of telling someone else about, they do it because they don't have enough remarkable experiences with most of the brands they do business with. And in order to be able to do this, we hear a lot about exceeding customer expectations. It's impossible to exceed someone's expectation if you don't know what their expectation is. So we have to baseline, what are our customers' expectations? We're an e-commerce company. Okay, our customer expectations are that our products are in stock, that we ship them to them in a timely manner, that they arrive as described, undamaged. Okay, those are pretty basic expectations. Now, if we do that every day, we are a perfectly average e-commerce company. And you can be successful that way. I don't think you're ever going to be Amazon that way, but I think you can be perfectly successful that way. So what can we do to exceed our customer expectations? And my favorite example from Amazon is, if you look over the years, Amazon continues to improve its own system when it comes to product returns. Now, most retailers like to make it difficult to return because they don't want you to return. What Amazon figured out a long time ago was it's not about any one individual transaction, it's about the relationship. And so if we make it easy to return, we know what's going to happen. People are going to go back and buy more. And so they have continued. It used to be that you had to box it back up and you had to go figure out a way to print a label, and then you had to drop it off at the post office. And today you can stroll into one of 4 or 5 places with no box or no label and just hand them the product and say, here, you take care of it for me. It's so easy. And that is the kind of thing that is an enhancer for customers, where we are exceeding their expectations, because the expectation is it's going to be difficult to return this product. And instead, we do something and they say, wow, that was so easy. Let me go back to Amazon and use my credit and go buy something else.
And this goes back full circle to what we were talking about, because I think a lot of organizations begin to get desperate. I don't want to lose a business. I don't want to lose a sale. And so they make especially this is very common on SaaS platforms and software platforms, where you can't unsubscribe. You've got to like talk to somebody. You've got to email. There's, and I am through with all those types of companies. So if you're listening and you have a SaaS program and you make it difficult to unsubscribe, I'm not even going to subscribe. If I have to contact you, if there's not a simple button says boom, unsubscribe, I'm not interested. Now, again, it goes to your point. That's convenience. That is ease of use. I actually may come back to you if I know it's easy to add you as a customer and to unsubscribe. I don't know what the situation is. Maybe there is a financial situation, and this month I just can't do it. That I have to understand up front. And if you hide it and you make it impossible and you do these shady things to try to keep me, I just look at you as not a legit business.
No, 100% agree. I don't think trying to trick customers is a good strategy ever. It's not, whether you're trying to sneak in a price increase or you're trying to add, even the Biden administration and even the Trump administration were focused on some of these junk fees and these added fees, the hotel resort fees and all this stuff, so that just so they can advertise a nightly rate that actually is 40% higher, right? Anything where if your mindset is about how do we fool the customer, it is just that's a transaction related business, which is all we care about is the transaction. We don't care if this customer ever comes back. We just want the one transaction. And I think very few businesses can live on that, because unless you are doing, billions of transactions. And so I am always for being transparent, being easy and convenient. Look, the fact that you can click a button and unsubscribe is actually a money saver for the company too, because now they don't have to have a call center talk to you for however long that's going to take. That's going to cost money. Only a few, a small percentage of those people change their mind. The ones that do, we got to give them a discount to anyway. So if you think about all the complexity that's involved in that retention call, and now you've gotten rid of all of that, the company probably saves money this way as well. But it's also a better way of thinking because it is customer centric. And I've had the same thing. I have left software and I've come back to it because I might not need it now, but I'm going to need it again later. Or I've left companies, but I've still referred them to other people. And I used this company for a year. It was wonderful. Why'd you stop using it? Because I didn't need it anymore. But for the year that I needed it, it was awesome. I highly recommend it. People forget that the customers that have left you can still be referral sources, and they can still leave with a smile on their face and feeling good about their relationship with you. But if you do what you described, they're going to leave and feel bad about the relationship with you. And what do you think happens then? They tell other people, and we don't want that.
Yeah. I'm not going to get political here, but since you mentioned Biden and Trump, I have an interesting thought that popped into my head. In today's world, we are very loyal and we're definitely, as you know, socially, politically, we are split down the middle and we are completely one side or the other and fiercely loyal on one side or the other. Do we see the brands that come to mind right now are Apple versus Android as an example? You're either fiercely loyal to Apple or fiercely loyal to Android. Maybe search engines, although Google is still fairly popular. Definitely in fast foods, I think you've got your diehard McDonald's. And really, even if you have a bad experience at McDonald's, you're still probably going to go back to McDonald's because you're diehard, right? Do we see some type of similarity between our social and political belief systems and the loyalties that we have between products, despite whatever that experience might be?
That's a fascinating question. I haven't been asked that before. I am going to tread lightly here because of my policy of not discussing politics or religion.
Yeah, mine too. So just so you know, I don't like touching on politics, but I think this
I hear you.
theory is interesting.
Yeah. So I did write a post. I want to say I wrote it about a year ago on my blog about embracing the middle, and how that this is a good business decision, but it's also probably a fix to our political failures in the US, which is that if you look at most issues, they aren't black and white. They're just not. They're gray. And the problem is that most people refuse to embrace the gray. And if you embrace the gray, then you encourage conversations between people. Then you encourage collaboration. You encourage compromise, and you find answers that are somewhere in the middle. I read some stat a little while ago that something like 82% of Americans, if you ask them where they are on the abortion debate, they are somewhere in the middle, which means they are somewhere between no abortions ever and abortions for everyone. There's 82% are somewhere between there, which to me says there's plenty of conversation to be had about how to solve a problem. Now, as it pertains to brands, and we are far from that, sadly, and I do think that's become a very disappointing aspect of the U.S. at least, where we used to have these conversations. We used to watch our politicians work together to solve problems, and that just doesn't happen anymore. I think when it comes to brands, I'm always reminded of a great line that a former boss of mine used to say, which is loyalty goes both ways. And what that means is we always think of customers being loyal to brands, but are brands loyal to their customers? And when they are, that's when the customers become even more loyal. They go hand in hand, right? And so sometimes this is expressed as a loyalty program, right? Well, I go to Starbucks because I collect my stars and then I get free drinks. And so it's self-perpetuating. But sometimes it is expressed as the brand simply acknowledging, thanking, showing love to their existing customers, which I think is kind of what Skittles did, right? And so you're left feeling like, it's not that I won't eat any candy, like that I won't touch a jelly bean or something. It's not that, but it is that I will always have a little soft spot for Skittles because I feel like Skittles gets me. And so in brands, and I'll tell you from working at McDonald's, yes, you absolutely have your diehards, but most fast food eaters have some sort of a rotation. And so it might not be, McDonald's might be their favorite burger place, but they're still going to Subway or they're going to Arby's or they're going to something that's not a burger place. And so, which is all competition as well. And a lot of it is you just want to be part of the rotation. And I think this, if you think about this from the perspective of other types of companies, it's not a bad philosophy to be, look, we just want to be one of your preferred vendors, right? We want to be one of your preferred companies. We don't have to have it all. I think most people in the United States have relationships with more than one bank, for example. Maybe you have your checking account somewhere and you have your credit card somewhere else. That's okay. Now, I'm sure both banks would prefer that we do it all together, but we can share our loyalties and still be okay. And so in summary, I would say, I think this concept of embracing the middle should work for politics, but I also think it works for customers and their relationships with brands. Because I don't know anyone that makes every retail purchase at Amazon. I know people that make a ton of purchases at Amazon. I don't know anyone that makes 100%. And so that's a good thing, is that we want people to embrace the middle and to hopefully experience multiple brands.
I think if we look historically, another brand that came to mind would be like the Cola Wars, Pepsi versus Coca-Cola, right? There's definitely clear loyalty lines in there. Like, I hate Coca-Cola, quite frankly, but I actually love them as a brand. I would never drink the soda, but I actually love the brand, right? I'm definitely a Pepsi drinker. Actually, Dr. Pepper is my preferred beverage, but that's a whole nother conversation. If we look back, go back to the 1950s, 1940s, 50s, 60s, the loyalty of brands started in the household. You look at like detergent, your mom used it, so then you grew up using it. And there's a lot of case studies out there around that. One of the things that I think is interesting as you think about embracing that gray area is that we often look at brands as being competitive with each other. And theoretically, or the reality is they are, we've got brand competition. Pepsi and Coca-Cola are at odds with each other. Yet there is something to be said about brands who are willing to look past that competition and work together. Now, whether or not that is, look, obviously we have colas inside of fast foods. Those are natural synergies. But I think there are cases where uh, those collaborations, pay off from a consumer perspective. So you don't necessarily have to look at a brand and say, "Oh, well, that's our competition." How do I actually begin to collaborate or work with my competition to bring these new experiences to the consumers where they get best of both worlds, in that
Yeah.
great space?
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, co-branding has been around for a long time. I mean, I think of a couple of things when you mentioned this. The first was that I think it was the cola companies that all banded together at some point and made some climate pledge together to reduce or to increase the amount of recycled glass or something like that. I think that's a great example of something where we can work together even though we are competitors for the greater good. I also think about I love this idea. I've written about this as well, that oftentimes as businesses, we work with other businesses who are our partners. And one of the things we forget is that they're part of our customer journey, even if we have no control over it. So think of an e-commerce company that uses UPS or FedEx or the Postal Service to deliver their package. Now, I once had an occasion, I caught it on my Ring camera, where one of those companies, I won't tell you which one, literally lined up and threw my package onto my front stoop. Now, who should I be upset with? Should I be upset with the company that I ordered the product for? Should I be upset with the company that delivered? Am I, as a customer, do I even need to figure out the difference between the two? And the reality is that usually where the customer's brain goes is to the place they ordered it. And one of the examples that I used in this post was I'm from Chicago. I'm a big Cubs fan, and Wrigley Field and the Cubs decided a few years ago to cut ties with Old Style beer. And Old Style beer is this beer that if you had in your refrigerator at home, you'd be like, I don't know why I have this beer. But when you're at Wrigley Field, that's the beer you have. Wrigley Field and Old Style are like, what is it? What is it in apple pie?
Peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they just go together, right? And that is the beer that you expect. It's the beer that your dad and your granddad and your grandparents had when they went to Wrigley Field. And so they cut ties because some bigger beer company came in and gave them more money. And I think that was a huge mistake. I think it was one of these things where it broke this connection that people had, not just with the beer, but with Wrigley Field and the Cubs, right? And it's the people that you associate with that have an impact. There are certain things that a baseball stadium can't control. They can't control the weather. They can't control how the team plays on the field that day. There are aspects that are beyond their control, but the ones that are in your control, you want to make sure that you're focused on, that there's alignment and synergy, and that your customers, and understanding how your customers feel about that alignment. Because as a customer, do I really know the difference when my package is delivered by UPS or FedEx? Probably not, until something happens, until something goes wrong. I just placed an order a couple of weeks ago for at a company, and the package for 2 weeks kept getting listed as ready to be shipped, ready to be shipped. It just never shipped. Right now, who do I blame? Well, I went back to the company that I ordered from and said, and they're like, well, but the shipping company, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. I don't have my product is really the issue. And I ordered it from you. So it's your problem. The old expression, it's not your problem. It's not your fault, but it's still your problem. I think this is one that companies have to certainly be aware of.
That introduces one more concept for us to talk about before we wrap things up, and that's around the community. So Wrigley Field is a great example. It's the community that was really, the central part of that experience. And I look at communities definitely in the software space, not just social media, right? But the communities and the followers of the brand. So Skittles, as an example, you had a big community that was reaching out, complaining, and then they supported that community in return. How critical is it for organizations to foster that community?
It's absolutely huge. I'll give you another example that is a company that's actually really known for its community, and another one that admitted that they were wrong, which is Intuit. So Intuit, you may know, owns TurboTax. They own QuickBooks. They own Mint, etc. And one of the things that they've done super well is establish these communities that basically become their customer service team. So like you have a problem in TurboTax, they have a community that you can go to and ask almost any question, and you're going to get your answer really fast because they just, so many questions have been asked over the years. And obviously if you're having a problem, someone else has probably had the problem. And so they encourage this community. I think they even help fund it, so that you end up having these people that don't get paid, but they are, you know, they want to get a badge to say they're the biggest helper in the community or whatever. And I think it's great. What happened with them beginning of last year, of 2022, they have this product that not many people know about, that I have been a user of for years, that's called It's Deductible. It's a free service that allows you to put in all of your charitable contributions, both cash, and if you bring a whole box of stuff to Goodwill, it allows you to literally say, I brought 3 sweaters and 4 shirts or whatever, and it prices it out for you and tells you what the value is. It's so helpful in that way. And they announced at the end of 2021 that they were closing down It's Deductible. And they just were getting rid of it. And maybe it was the end of 2022. I think it was the end of 2022. And there was an uproar from a very loud minority, because clearly not enough people were using it. By the way, it connects into TurboTax. So then when you get to the part in your taxes, it just uploads it all. It's super easy. But they got so many complaints that about a month later, they sent another email and they said, okay, we heard you. We're not going to get rid of it. And everybody cheered. And so that is the power of community, right? And now, granted, we'll see if in another year they try it again, or hopefully they actually put some money into it and make it bigger so that more people are aware of it and use it. You hear me talking about it, right? It's a free service, and here I am, word of mouth marketing, telling you, hey, if you do your own taxes, this is great. But I loved that they leveraged their community, that they listened to their community. And I think they've done a very good job, as I said, of also using it for service. Because one of the things we haven't been able to get to in this conversation, but is a huge trend in experience, is this desire for self-service. And most people today of a certain age want to self-serve. They want to try to self-serve before they have to call someone or chat with someone or do something else. And so the more we let people self-serve, the more satisfied they are. And I think Intuit's done a great job with it. It's pretty easy to find the answer to almost any question that you have without having to wait on hold and talk to somebody and spend a whole bunch of time on the phone.
Okay, so you mentioned self-serve, and obviously that's going to go, you're talking about purely online self-service, but recently in the news, self-service in shopping malls and definitely Target has come back out, where they're thinking about starting to reverse some of our self-service checkout lines, because it's clear that not a lot of people like it. There's a lot of controversy around it. Like, this isn't my job. So real quickly, do you see that trend starting to change, or do you think we're going to stay with the self-serve checkout lines?
The biggest issue that I've heard going on with self-serve checkout lines is theft. And I think that's the issue that needs to be solved. We have a grocery store near us that offers both self-checkout and actually, no, we have one that most of the grocery stores offer both. This particular one only offers self-checkout. But you know what? Everything in the store is cheaper than your other grocery store. I don't mind self-checkout personally. I actually like it when I go with either of my teenagers. They like scanning the stuff and whatever. The problem I have is that the checkout technology is still not good enough. And so it makes mistakes. It gets stuck. Everybody's been there. Well, let me call an assistant. I'm like, no, I don't want help. And then you have to stand there until somebody comes, or like this same grocery store every once in a while issues coupons, but the machine never recognizes the coupon. So it's like, oh, do I want to save the money or do I want to save the time? I shouldn't have to choose between these two things, but I have to.
Yeah.
So if we can get the tech better, and I think that will include fraud prevention, or theft prevention. I think it just isn't good enough quite yet, and it can be. I don't mind it, especially when I can save money. I also don't mind it because I can pack the bags in the way that I want to pack the bags. I tend to be a little more environmentally friendly, so I can't stand it when some person at the end of the checkout line is putting like one item in each plastic bag. And I'm like, oh, first of all, I want paper. And second of all, fill it as high as you can because I want as few bags as possible. But then other people are, like it the opposite, and that's fine too. So I kind of like the control that you have. I understand others would prefer the full service element, and that's okay too. But I think they have to be willing to pay for it. And they have to understand that the full service element costs the company more, and that there's a trade-off there.
Yeah. Brilliant. How about if you promote your book a little bit?
Well, The Experience Maker, you got it right up there. How to create remarkable experiences that your customers can't wait to share. One of the best compliments I get about this book is that it's a simple read. And I really appreciate that comment because I did not sit with a thesaurus writing it. I didn't want to try to sound smart with big words. You may have noticed I haven't used a whole lot of big words in this conversation. So it is a very readable book. And I think that you'll find it really useful if customer experience is something you want to get better at. So I appreciate you putting it up there. It was certainly a prideful moment for me. And it is, thank you. I appreciate it.
I was on a podcast a couple of weeks ago and somebody asked me, a typical question, like, what's the last book you read? And I pulled it up. I was like, There you go. I was like, so I gave you a little promotion on somebody else's podcast even.
Well, thank you.
It's a great read. Definitely encourage everybody to reach out and grab a copy for themselves. Thank you so much, Dan. It's been a fabulous conversation. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Very interesting, and definitely went down some paths that I haven't gone down in other interviews. So thank you for that. It was fun for me as well.
Yes, of course. And everybody, thank you for tuning in and watching. We will be back next week again on Wednesday at 10 o'clock a.m. Pacific time for another exciting episode of Customer Transformation Live. Thanks, everyone.